It's time to talk about all the news from D23. Nate Parrish from WEDWay Radio is here, and hold on to your hats, folks. There is so much to talk about. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Thanks so much for joining me here on episode 25 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I'm your host, Dan Heaton. It seems like for so long, Disney fans like myself and others that are very interested in the parks have been obsessed over knowing what Disney would announce at the D23 Expo this year, especially at the Parks and Resorts panel, which happened on July 15th. And we finally know what they announced. Some of the announcements were what we expected. Others were big surprises. Overall, I'm pretty excited about the future of the parks. But I didn't want to just tell you what I thought about it. I thought it would be a lot more interesting to bounce my thoughts off someone else who also knows a lot about the parks. That's why I brought in Nate Parrish from the long-running WEDWay Radio podcast. And he had a lot of interesting thoughts about what is happening and where the parks are going. It's easy to get upset about changes that we don't like. I'm a huge fan of Epcot Center, so it is hard for me sometimes to take a view that is not immediately reactionary and say, this doesn't fit with what I want Epcot to be. But when I get beyond that, there are some things to like with these announcements. And this is going to be a long discussion, so I don't want to waste any more time talking up front because I just want to get you right to the conversation. So let's get to my talk with Nate Parrish. All right, well, I am here with the host of WEDWay Radio, which is one of the most insightful Disney podcasts out there. He also helped create and produce the Beta Mouse podcast, which is no longer running, but was also a great podcast. It is Nate Parrish. Nate, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, thanks. And thanks for mentioning Beta Mouse. I wonder how many people actually even know what that is now.
Well, you know, I'm sure there are still a lot of people that are like, oh, is that going to come back? But then there's probably...
No.
No, not at all. But then there's a group of people that just started listening to podcasts in the last few years that are thinking like, what? Podcast happened that long ago? So I think there's different groups of us. But yeah, I know you've been podcasting for a really long time and they're still doing it on WEDWay Radio. So the show itself, we are going to talk about D23 and a lot of the announcements that came out last weekend or a little over a week ago, where Disney came out and for an hour and a half just dropped a ton of news. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about you. So before you started doing a podcast, before you went to Disney World as an adult, how did you get started about getting interested in the parks? Like, how far back does it go?
My family, we would go to Walt Disney World like every other year. And I should say, I live in Kansas City, Missouri. So I'm about a 20-hour drive from Walt Disney World. We flew sometimes, or we would drive. We would go about every other year in the 80s. And then in the 90s, it really kind of picked up. We would go about every year. And then in 1996, I worked on the Disney College program. So I worked at the Sci-Fi Dine-In Theater Restaurant and in good old Disney MGM Studios, which will always be Disney MGM Studios to me.
Oh, of course.
Right. And then, I kind of stuck with it. I met my wife. She was not a Disney fan before we met, but I wasn't like Mr. Super into Disney, but I was like, hey, let's go to Disney World, when we were dating. And so she loved it. I was like, this is great. So we got married there. We got married at the boardwalk. And ever since then, that was in 2000. We've been taking trips there. And then in 2000, and as soon as my wife and I got married, we started going to Disneyland, which I'd never been to. And that really kind of opened up my whole Disney history, appreciation, all that. And then through the podcast, we started the podcast in 2009. Through the podcast, I've been able to do some things like tour the studios and things like that and get some special access. And I do the podcast with my brother, Matt, and we've done it since, like I said, February of 2009. And he works in radio, which made it kind of easy to start. But, ever since then, we've done about, I don't know, 300 some episodes covering Disney history, Disney news, Disney, just all sorts of stuff. Disney history is kind of our forte. We really like that. That's fun stuff to explore, whether it's theme park, attractions, lands, history of the company, stuff like that. We'll do different episodes that are themed to different stuff. And then lately, this past year, we started doing episodes that are more in-depth and fewer in frequency, but way higher quality, more like on the level of like what you'd expect from like Gimlet or NPR and things like that. So we really want to kind of step up the quality. And my brother does another podcast called 3028 with Kevin Quigley. So he does a podcast with him. We do our own show. So we've kind of branched out. I did Beta Mouse in 2010 and 2011 with a few people that two of them are like Disney Imagineers now. Wow. It's been fun. Yeah, that was a show focused on like the convergence of Disney and technology. Been a fun ride.
Well, great. I think I could ask about 20 questions about your background, but we are going to get to D23. But I did want to zone in a bit on starting a podcast because a lot of shows, podcasts really picked up and Disney podcasts were a little bit in front of a lot of other ones. But still, we're looking at 2005, 2006, but you were still kind of on the early end. What made you guys want to start a podcast at that point? Because there were some big names like Lou Mangello and Ricky Briganti, but it wasn't like now. There were not the plethora of podcasts, and it didn't seem like there was as big a crowd for it as there is now.
Yeah, there wasn't this. The space was smaller. We'll put it that way. The space was smaller, and so here's how the podcast actually started. Right on 2004, 2005. Like I said, really into Disney history, and I was like, I'm going to write a book. And I'm a history teacher by trade, so I was like, I'm gonna write a Disney history book, see where that goes. I did all this research, a whole bunch of research. I live in Kansas City, where Disney's from, one of the places he's from. I was like, oh, let's go visit Marceline. Let's go to see Walt's houses in LA, stuff like that. So we did all this like preliminary research, not just for the book, but for vacations and stuff like that. Not that we vacationed in Marceline, but that's only 2 hours away. So anyway, we went there. And then in 2006, my son was born. As you know, like you have a kid, your life kind of takes a turn. Like maybe this stuff doesn't seem as important. But I'd done all this research and like old school research, like on note cards and stuff that I thought that's how you write a book, right? So I had done all this research and read all these books and bought all these books to try and create a Disney history book. Then I discovered podcasts in 2007. I was running a lot. I was on like a message board and someone said, have you heard of like Pod Runner? I was like, what's a podcast? And I didn't know what a podcast was. I thought they cost money. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm a teacher, so I can't afford that stuff. So, I got my first iPod then. I was like, wow. So I got onto iTunes. I just put in Disney. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. Maybe like 50, 70 podcasts. Some of them were like 3 episodes and quit. But I was like, this is something I could do. And I talked to my brother about it. We'd had, WEDWay Radio started out at like 2-hour discussions that my brother would have and I would have on the phone. And so we started there. I was like, could you do it? Could you produce a podcast? And he was like, yeah, I think I could. And he was working in radio as a producer. Now he's a station manager working at a radio station. He was like, yeah, I got all the equipment. We could probably put something together. So we did. They were terrible. They were really bad. So we recorded one episode and it was really bad. And we were like, okay, we're going to do this again. So we recorded another episode and it was really bad. And finally, by episode 5, we're like, this sounds not terrible. Let's put it out there. And we were naming them as we started. So the very first episode is episode 5. So there's no episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. A few years ago, like on our anniversary, we're like, okay, we're going to do something really special. We're going to release the first episode. And we released it and we talked through it. And we're like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? That sounds so ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like it was like literally us introducing our podcast. And it was like, this is one segment and this is another segment. It was going to have like 10 segments. And I was like, what were we thinking? Who's going to write all this? Who's going to edit all this? We were just pie in the sky type stuff. But anyway, that's basically how it started. And we did about 20 episodes our first season, then like 30 our second year, and started to meet people. And if you put the work into making a good show, people are going to notice. And that's I think just putting in work has helped us kind of grow and gain listeners and not getting caught up on who has the best show, or who has a better show, or who. There seems to be a lot of like jealousy, I think, maybe a little bit. Maybe I'm going off on another tangent here, but when I remember a few years ago, there was a lot of like people that didn't like other podcasters, and I was like, I don't live in Orlando, I don't live in LA, so I'm kind of an outsider, so I just kind of watched a lot happened, but we just wanted to make the best show we could, and it's done pretty well.
Well, yeah, I think the fact that you guys have been doing this show for that long is a testament to the work you're putting in. But back to your point, yeah, I think I live in St. Louis, which is, just across the state from you. So we're both definitely out of the bubble of bloggers and podcasters and fans and everything. So it does seem kind of interesting when you have everything going on there, good and bad. There's really good camaraderie among people in some of these cities. It does seem different where I'm just kind of like, you're doing this show for years where you're traveling, but you're as much apart from it, looking at it from a different view.
Totally.
So, yeah. And also about this, as someone who's on episode 25, I can definitely understand, because even though I had what I thought were good guests who helped a lot early on, I've only recently started to feel like, okay, I think I'm starting to get the hang of this. So I'm impressed that you guys actually didn't release the first stuff. That shows some smarts there, because I'd like to go re-record especially my introduction podcast from the start. I think I don't even want to listen to it. But so you've been doing it for 8 years, though. What keeps you kind of interested in doing the show? I mean, I know you don't do as many episodes now as you used to, but what keeps you engaged by sitting down and recording?
Well, we've kind of evolved over time. Like, we used to do shows that were just about like just whatever, let's do a show on Tower of Terror, but we wouldn't do a whole lot of research. And then we would, have a show that was like 30 minutes and covering all of the Tower of Terror. And I'm like, dang, we do a show in like 7 episodes now to cover Tower of Terror, We've tried different things. We've added different kinds of shows. We did a movie show for a long time called WEDWay Now on the big screen. I was really, really passionate about that for a while. And then, I don't know, I just got maybe too tired of it. WEDWay Now started as a news show because we used to do news in the show. But then I was like, well, if we want these to be kind of timeless and anthology, maybe we shouldn't focus on news every episode, because when you go back and listen to a 4-year-old show, do you really want to listen to 20 minutes of a news segment? So we kind of dropped that and broke it onto its new show, which was called WEDWay Now. And then just lately, just trying to make better quality shows with, different audio elements, involve more people in the show in terms of like having them do voiceovers, things like that. Just having fun with it. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't think that you're, 60 minutes. I think that's kind of what's kept us kind of pretty level on it.
Well, cool. Yeah. And I think the podcast genre or medium in general is moving kind of towards that. You see a lot of shows come where they're like, we're just going to do 10 episodes, or we're going to do a season like yes. You mentioned you do.
I love those. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's tougher. I mean, you had shows like WW Today, especially the original version, and others that were doing we're doing 3 episodes a week. Be Our Guest does that, where it seems like they're doing so many shows. And I'm impressed by those shows. I said, that's amazing that they're doing that. It's just, but there's different genres inside the genre. So it's well, good to
Mike
find
and I
what
are
you
pretty
can do.
close. Mike and I talk a lot, and I think the secret to his show is he only has to come up with 20 minutes of content a week to make 3 shows, because one of them is about he basically talks to somebody about a recent vacation, that's probably booked through his tour company. And then another one is questions, and they're down there all the time, so they can answer all sorts of questions from people planning their show. And then the last show is a content related show, but it's only about 20 minutes of content. So, and they record them all on Monday night, just knock them all out. Seems pretty good. I mean, he's got a good system there too.
Oh yeah, well that's a good approach, because that's what I think when you do a show for a long time, you have to find that what works for you, and that approach sounds very feasible, especially if you want to put out that many episodes. But let's dive in. I feel like we've gotten a pretty good gauge on what you do. I did want to talk to you because I feel like what sprung this kind of me thinking you'd be a good guest for this is, I guess I was on your show back in March where we talked about all the different rumors for Epcot. And it's funny now, I haven't listened to it or gone back to it, but it'd be funny to hear that and listen to what they actually announced. Some things still might get announced down the road. But so we're not going to just talk about Epcot, but I wanted to talk about the various announcements that Disney made, especially at Epcot and the Magic Kingdom, and a little bit with the Hollywood studios. But in general, I mean, I know you didn't go to D23, but you've heard a lot of the news and stuff. What did you think overall about the announcements? Response across Twitter and everything has been all over the map.
I am not a big fan of a lot of change at Disney World and Disneyland, so I'm not too hyped about taking stuff out and putting new stuff in. I'm not a huge fan of change, just because I like to see things grow over time. And one of the great things about going to Walt Disney World with my kid was taking him on stuff that I did when I was a kid. And I have pictures of myself in front of this, pictures of myself here when I was a kid versus there. And that's kind of the stuff that I like, stuff I get excited about, recreating stuff that my parents did for us when I was a kid, and then me doing that for my own son. So whenever I see a whole lot of change and a whole lot of announcements, I get a little leery. So seeing a lot of announcements kind of made me worried, I guess.
I can understand that. I mean, what I find funny, because I also have kids, is that the things that they grab onto, like I heard a story the other day that Carousel of Progress, they might redo it and they might bring it back. And that's not a popular attraction. And I told my daughter and she was like, oh, right. It's and so it's funny that sometimes the things you did as a kid, it's not always, yes, they'll love Space Mountain or whatever, but it's not always just the headliners. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because, I was kind of going to go by park, but I think there's better ways to split this as we talk here. There are two examples. So let's knock out the ones that people are generally that involve the most change. And the first one is Guardians of the Galaxy coming to Epcot for Universe of Energy. Now, this one was like the worst kept secret in the world, though I kind of, even when I think we talked, I kind of hoped it was Tron, and we'll get to that in a little bit, because I felt like that fit a little bit better. But Universe of Energy, to me, was an attraction that needed to be updated. And it did get updated in 96 with Ellen, but there were things that they need to fix. I love the dinosaur scenes. I still think the scope of it is impressive in the moving theater, but it needed some help. Now, the help I would have chosen might not have been the Guardians of the Galaxy, but hey, Peter Quill went to Epcot apparently by the picture that they showed, which I don't know. But so is that one of the ones that, because I know some fans are really upset, especially because it's closing so soon. It's closing in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
but what do you think of that one? I mean, the Guardians at Epcot is probably, of all the changes they announced, I mean, there's one other big one, but the biggest change, but they do already have Frozen. They do already have other things. Is this a new level, or is this just kind of more of the same?
It's keeping on that same level of, I can't believe they would do this here. I think Guardians of the Galaxy, love the film. Chris Pratt is the most magnetic person on the screen today. I mean, he's just so fantastic, right? Everything he's done from Jurassic World to Parks and Rec to Guardians of the Galaxy, love it. I'm not sure why it's going in the Universe of Energy, other than we don't like the Universe of Energy and it costs too much to run. It doesn't have a huge line. We don't have anything here to pull people in on this side of the park like we thought we would. I'm not opposed to Guardians of the Galaxy going in there. I always think back to Disneyland and all the crazy stuff that they had in the first 20 years. And, they opened a Star Wars ride in, 1987, and in Tomorrowland. And you're like, that doesn't really go with Tomorrowland, but it's still fun, right? Guardians of the Galaxy going into Epcot has nothing to do with Epcot, but I'm okay with it. I like Universe of Energy, but I don't want it to last forever. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think at some point it will become like a joke. The most impressive part of the Universe of Energy is the lasting kind of how they picked Ellen DeGeneres back then and how she's still super popular today. Because if you think of Disney and ABC in 1996, who they would put in there that was going to be like someone who would last a long time, I mean, they picked the right person. So the fact that Ellen has had this long career longevity and now she's there, but it's kind of weird because it's like 90s Ellen versus today's dancing talk show Ellen. But still, I mean, I think that's really the only thing that has made the Universe of Energy last is the fact that it has Ellen. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of funny. I enjoy it, but I'm not going to be sad when it leaves.
Yeah.
So.
And the interesting thing about that, I mean, you do have Alex Trebek with the mustache, which is weird,
right.
But Jeopardy's still on. Bill Nye has a show on Netflix, so it's like, even though they're younger and everything, I agree. I think if the original version, which I barely remember, even though I wrote it as a kid, was a lot more serious. It was
long and it was dull.
I remember the finale with the song and like the lasers, and I thought that was cool. But it's one of those things where if you just said, hey, they're gonna spend a ton of money, they're gonna put an e-ticket in, they're gonna replace Universal Energy, I'd be like, okay, that's great. But then they say it's Guardians, and then the way they presented it, I was kind of like, oh goodness, that the real becomes fantastic and the fantastic becomes real. I don't think that's what Epcot Center really was, but that's the selling point. Or I'm going to read a quote. This was from the Disney Parks blog about the Guardians of the Galaxy. We are adhering to the original version of Epcot's Future World as the place to experience the excitement and adventure offered by space travel. Now, you would think that go with Mission Space, but still, right. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? I mean,
right.
They did address space, but I don't remember that being the draw. Who knows? Maybe they will surprise me, and I'm going to hold out hope a little bit, but I guess because this one was a rumor for so long, it doesn't hit me as much as if it did if it came out of nowhere.
The parts about these new attractions and new announcements that make me the most like jaded are when they try and justify it by things like that. And I'm like, okay, if you want to make an attraction that's going to draw in a bunch of people and be popular, just say that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Don't say this goes with Epcot's original theme. This goes that. That's the part where the people who are like really into Disney history and Disney and what my brother calls Epcot purists, that's what gets under their skin. It gets under my skin too, because I'm like, that's not right. Sorry, it's not right.
Yeah, they brought up Tom Fitzgerald, who worked on Horizons and has this connection to it, and they made the point to show that, and he gets up there and he's saying these things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he doesn't believe it. But
no,
let's move on, because here's the other one, and we'll come back to Epcot because there were a ton of announcements from Epcot, I will tell you. But the other one that's really bugging people is the removal of the Great Movie Ride, and for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. I rode the Great Movie Ride on my last trip in March with my kids and everything.
Good for you.
And, we didn't buy it because it was really hot and we were waiting to do something else. Because, I don't know, the girls, they're a little young. The alien thing's a little freaky, but they enjoyed it. They had fun with it. It wasn't their favorite thing, but it was cool. I'm glad I did, because now I won't be there before August. So that one, I think this is kind of, to me, the last, I wouldn't say last straw, but this is the last move that completely changes the old Disney MGM Studios into the new unnamed, it says Hollywood Studios, but at some point they're going to name a new name. And I don't mind them focusing a ride on Mickey. This just seems like a weird place to put it. I don't know. What do you think? Am I overly nostalgic for a Great Movie Ride because I rode it the first year it was open and it was like the only ride there? And again, I'm not as angry as a lot of fans are. So I feel like I'm a little more pragmatic, but still, it does feel weird that they're putting in a screen-based, mostly Mickey ride right there.
Yes. Okay, so this is the one that makes me really upset, mainly because that is the marquee attraction at the studios. Whether they like it or not, that is the attraction that ties it to the different parts of the park, right? So when the studios opened, you had two separate areas of the park. You had the onstage part and the backstage part. And the separation were the guard booths, right? So when you went past there, you went from onstage to backstage. And when they removed that, I was like, this doesn't look good. And that was right at about the time when they changed the name of the park. I was like, okay, well, no more MGM. But they started to really change the focus of the park. They added in the Pixar attraction. They added in the Toy Story Mania, which, is just an attraction. Doesn't fit with the studio's theme or anything like that. Right. But here's the deal. I love old Hollywood. That's one of I'm a history fan. I love the sentimental value of this Hollywood that never existed, that exists in people's mind for so long. I love that. That stuff is just, I love old movies. I love old stuff. That attraction going away hurts me. It hurts me because that to me is Walt Disney World. That's magic to me. That's creating an attraction that is immersive, that had one of the best queues of any attraction in all of Walt Disney World. That attraction had interactiveness. It had some of the best audio animatronics. It was about the movies, which I love. I mean, it was just so great. And they put so much time and care and theming and everything into it. And to see that it's going away to make a Mickey Mouse attraction, which could literally go anywhere in any park, right? Could go anywhere. It could go, they could build a warehouse. They could build a giant box and put it in there like they did with Rock and Roller Coaster. I mean, literally, and to put it there just really upsets me. Not like mad upset, or I haven't even posted anything online about it, but I'm just like, you know what? It just shows me that the people that are making the decisions now, they don't get it. They really don't. They don't get it. They're motivated by dollars. They're motivated by intellectual properties, and they're not motivated by creativity and trying to create things that are unique and great experiences. And it just makes me leery about the future. I mean, I'm just like, when I think about that, I'm like, all right, that's just one more thing. Just one more thing that's gone away, that's changing, that's going to be gone forever. That was just an amazing attraction. And like you, I rode it the first year it was built. We went there in August of '89. We were there the first day the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular opened. We were like one of the first people to ever see it. And then, so I just have this kinship to that park because I was there right when it opened, and I worked there, and I did the movie ride a billion times while I worked there. I mean, it was so cool, and I'm just really excited to see it go.
Yeah, and I can understand that, especially given that you worked there and you were there so much, because that ride, opening in '89 and then for that park. They didn't have that many rides. They added Star Tours pretty quickly, and then eventually, but Tower of Terror wasn't until like 94 or around the mid 90s. Mm-hmm, so it's like for a while, the rides you did at that park were, it was a great movie ride, and then Star Tours, and then you'd see Indiana Jones, and then the Muppets came a little later. So it was a key part of the park. Plus, they had the walking tour and everything. So it will really change that park. The question is, they showed us, there's other things just to continue in that park. They showed the Toy Story Land, which looks like it's going to be at least, the coaster looks more impressive than some of the off-the-shelf Toy Story Lands they have overseas and stuff, or Bugs Land in California or whatnot. And then they showed the Star Wars model, which looks incredible. So, I mean, I think the amount of people that are going to be in that area is insane. But It does make me wonder about the park, because you look at it, it's still, you've got Tower of Terror Rock and Roller Coaster on one end, which still has that old Sunset Boulevard feel. You've got the Pixar area, which is going to expand. You got Star Wars. You still have Indiana Jones and the Muppets. I mean, I assume it's going to be called some sort of like Hollywood Adventure, because it's basically all these different areas from Hollywood. It's actually really, in a lot of ways, similar to what Universal Studios has become, in a sense.
Yeah.
Both of them have kind of pulled away from the movie. They still have movie things, but it's different. They don't really go.
It's totally different, right?
So it's going to be interesting. What do you think about Star Wars after seeing? After the news we have, Rex from Star Tours is going to be a DJ at the Cantina, which is probably the oddest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah,
I wonder if Paul Rubens is going to voice him again. I'm not sure, but so what do you think? Are you excited about in general about? I mean, they're going to have the two attractions. It's going to open late 2019. I know it's going to be crazy, but notwithstanding the crowds, what do you think? Are you excited about it?
Yes, I am. I think it's going to be cool. I mean, this is something that I've wanted for a long time. It's a perfect place for this, perfect park for this. Just fantastic. I'm really excited about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, as someone discovered online. I'm like, that's great, and it's a good name. It's good. I like it because Star Wars, they can do anything with Star Wars, right? They could create any kind of world because it is its own universe. So, which maybe we'll talk about in another announcement later. But I like it. I think it's going to be great. I can't wait to go see it.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about if they can pull it off. A lot of the kind of immersive things where there's characters walking around that are aliens and you can interact with. And I've heard they've done something similar like a Knott's Berry Farm with this Western area, which I have not been to. But basically, it's almost like a dinner theater, but that sounds kind of bad connotations, but like a murder night hotel type thing, those kind of themed events, but every day. And to me, I'm just wondering if they can pull that off, because if they can, it's going to be about a lot more, and they almost need to, because those two attractions, if you can get a fast pass, it's kind of like Pandora now, but to the extreme in terms of lines and such. But getting on those is going to be a real challenge. So I'm really hoping the land, similar to what I've seen, I've not been to Pandora, but it seems like the land is almost as impressive as the rides.
Right.
And I think this, from the model and everything, I think it's going to be that way to the extreme.
Well, and I think they had a good opportunity to sit back and watch and see what Universal did with Harry Potter and then Diagon Alley and see, okay, what worked there? What did people like? What did people not like? People liked the immersiveness, but how can we build on that? So it's almost like when you started talking about that, I immediately thought of like Streetmosphere. You know what I mean? Like
right, yeah.
Star Wars Streetmosphere. Why not?
And that does harken back to the original MGM Studios event,
it does.
You know? I mean, I don't think they're going to be as goofy as they'll probably, but there's going to be some. Apparently, there's a bounty hunter that if you do badly, like on one of the attractions, the bounty hunter will come find you in the cantina and like talk to you, which who knows? I mean, that sounds amazing. I'm just trying to imagine that happening with thousands of people in this land.
Totally.
Like the one bounty hunter's like, all of you are bad. But I think it's going to be really exciting. But let's, I focus a lot on Epcot on this podcast. So let's go back to Epcot because I think, and I know I'm jumping around a bit from park to park, but I feel like there is kind of a flow from the removals to something like Star Wars to some of the things at Epcot that I did not have anywhere on my radar that I am pretty excited about. Like first, Ratatouille we knew about. I mean, we talked about that in March. I think both of us were okay with it, especially because they're not replacing Impressions de France, which I like a lot. They're expanding it, which that's another thing. I like when they add things that don't take away because then you're actually adding capacity. Like they haven't done that with Frozen and things. They're actually, in some of these places, you add an attraction so then it spreads people out. That's good. And they just haven't done that often recently. But there's a few examples here, Ratatouille and then in the Magic Kingdom especially, where they're doing that. But I feel like that's been covered pretty good. But what about a restaurant in Future World that's themed to space? Had you heard anything about this beforehand? Because I'm not talking to all the... I don't have my sources or anything, but nowhere had I heard they were doing this. And at least the art makes it look pretty amazing.
Well, they need a restaurant in Future World. I mean, honestly, they do. So I'm glad that they're adding one. I'm glad it's themed to space because that's kind of one of the tenets of original Epcot. So that's great. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And I read that it's being run by the same company that does Via Napoli and Tutto Italia, which I haven't been to Tutto Italia, I've been to Via Napoli. But they seem to do restaurants that people like. I think they're running more Moto. So it seems like this is a home run. I would figure, I mean, I imagine it's going to be like Be Our Guest or one of the other ones where trying to get a reservation will be a real challenge. But hey, I think it's a cool idea, and I like that it seems to fit with Epcot. Another thing that seems to fit is they're revising the China film, which is another one I hadn't heard about. Now, granted, when I think about it, they just opened Shanghai. Their movies are really focused on China. It makes sense. But it's still, to me, I was like, they're redoing a Circle Vision movie?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I mean. We started kind of negative, but then I think of this and I'm like, somebody at Disney.
When was the last time that you heard about a new Circle Vision 360 film? When was the last one done?
Well, they did Canada, but that's not even really it because they fixed
That's true.
it. But the new stuff with Martin Short, most of that is not in 360. It's like they're cutting to him, and so I don't even know if I really count that. I mean, before that, you're talking like, I mean, they redid the China film, and they had the Timekeeper, but that was like 90 something. I mean,
93.
Yeah. So I probably the last China film, but this is, and the fact that they're doing this, which I don't really understand, but seamless 360. I assume that means they're shooting it digitally. They're not shooting it with the 9 cameras. It's some sort of like
9i is dead.
Camera.
Right. Yeah.
But isn't this exciting? I mean, who knows what it'll be, but at least as far as I know, there's no IP tied to it.
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't know they could do that anymore.
You know, at the last minute, they'll be like, and Mulan will be there.
Special guest appearance by Mulan. I'm really excited for this. I have been to China, so I am super excited to see what they show us in China. And I remember, I went to China as an adult. I went in 2014. But while I was there, I was thinking about this is part, what have I seen of this, or what has changed about what I'm seeing now in the Forbidden City from when it was at, when it was in the original Epcot film. I'm super excited. This makes me really happy. Circle Vision 360 films have been a part of Disney Parks since 1959. So
yeah,
it's going to be awesome.
It's a core part of it. And that's why I would love, I always have these thoughts in Tomorrowland, like when they get tired of the laugh floor, they still have the screens there from what I've heard. If they did some sort of like, at some point they're going to look backwards and do some sort of like retro stuff, like, and if they just opened up those screens and just showed all the different Circle Vision movies, like on a rotating schedule.
I would love that.
That's one of my, I don't know what, I was on a podcast when we were talking about this, but that's one of my favorite ideas, is just this idea that like you cut like the show schedules, you know, you get one of those and it's basically, I mean, I don't know if Timekeeper would really work because you're not going to leave the robot in there, but you could do some sort of variation, but you do like America the Beautiful and China and like the original Canada. And I mean, I'm trying to think there was like 3 or 4 others that they used at the time.
Well, there was a bunch of different, like there was America the Beautiful, and then there was the different incarnations of that. I need to tell you that in the 1980s at Disneyland, their Circle Vision 360 used to have America the Beautiful in the morning and then China in the afternoon. So they actually have done that before.
Well, no idea ever dies, I guess. But yeah, I'm hoping that this China film is really amazing and people like it, because that will just encourage them to either do more with their Circle Vision or just to realize that like they took something that was a little out of date and updated it, and I'm assuming it's going to be good. And that's what I want them to do in Epcot. Energy, that's gone. Okay. But you look at some of these other things, I love Living with the Land, and that's why I'm really happy. Our imagination needs help. But you see these different rides that have core elements in some way that could be good. Can they find ways to update? Because that's what they're doing with Mission Space. They're actually doing some sort of update. Apparently, though I've seen conflicting reports, it's August or October, but I've seen August. A new green version is going to open in August that just goes over Earth, and they're also going to have a new orange version with all new effects. So that's another case where I'm hoping, I mean, really, would it be that hard to make Mission Space better? I don't know. But
no, because the hard part, the hardware, I should say, is done. Right? Like building the building, doing all the setup for it. I mean, that is done. It's literally just reprogramming it. I mean, it's almost like when we used to think, my brother and I used to think about this all the time, like how hard would it be to make a new Soarin' film? You just reprogram the thing and you have new, you go out and you make a new film, right? And they've done that. And like I was like, maybe they should do that like every 5 years, because that would drive more people to want to see it while they're there. Not that I want a longer line for Soarin', but I think we're on the same wavelength there. Like it wouldn't be that hard to update it.
Yeah, and like, they always talked about that with Star Tours. They'd say, well, the great thing about it is we can update it, and then they didn't do it for so long. Though I think George Lucas still had some input there. So it's really easy to blame George Lucas. I'm not going to there. But you think about it, since they did that update, they added Jakku, and then they've started doing more regular updates. So maybe, and because it was so popular, I think it's just, especially at Disneyland where it's really popular, it could really. Hopefully this will help Mission Space, because I think there's potential there if they either do something customizable or something cool. What they have right now isn't doing it. One last thing about Epcot. They also threw on the screen, they did not release this on their blog. They threw on the screen a new entrance, which they had talked about before, but they threw this concept art up there, which is the craziest thing. One of the craziest things I've ever seen. It's got so much vegetation. There's all these water effects. The Interventions buildings appear to be gone. People have studied, like Inside the Magic did something where they like studied every part of it, little corner and such. But so did you get a chance to look at this concept art?
I did. Looks great.
Is it actually ever going to look anything like this?
It will not. It will. When I saw it, I thought of, it kind of looks to me like how they redid the hub. You know what I mean? Right. Where they were like, let's make more green space. Let's make more places for people to spread out. Same thing. I thought that when I saw that, and I was like, they're trying to create a bigger space because they're anticipating more people. They can put more carts out there. They can create more water features, things like that. Smaller water features that don't cost as much. And they can expand the area. And I like that because it is a huge area. I mean, isn't it a massive area there that they could redo?
Yeah, especially, I mean, if you take out, because you have in front of Spaceship Earth the Leave a Legacy tombstones that probably are going to go, and then you go behind it and you have those big canopies. Then there's a long walkway where during Flower and Garden they had all kinds of stuff there, but you really feel it too, especially on a hot day. You're like, this place is gigantic.
Oh, man.
I mean, I love Epcot, but you put in a lot of trees, you put in things to look at. I'm not talking even new rides. Make that look gorgeous, even if it's half as good as what that picture looks like. I think that's another win if they can do it.
I love it. I think it's a great idea.
All right. See, we're so positive now. This is good.
We are. We feel good. Yeah. This is a feel-good show now.
I don't mind if we're negative, really, because I'd much rather be, because all of us, that's the thing that's so tricky. Every one of us, like you mentioned, has a different reaction to things based on when we went to Disney and when we were there. Any change they do, it's going to rile up somebody. Like when they close Stitch, somebody's going to be like, that was my favorite ride forever. And I could laugh, but okay. But Magic Kingdom, this is what I talked about in terms of adding capacity. They've got two big announcements. The first one is, I had read the week before that Tron Light Cycle Power Run from Shanghai was going to Tomorrowland, but it was going to replace the Speedway.
Right.
And I thought, oh, okay, the Speedway's cool. My daughter loved going on it. I haven't taken my younger daughter, but I would love to do it. I understand. But they're not doing that. They're actually going to put in it next to Space Mountain and not replace the Speedway. The Speedway and Carousel of Progress, which according to Jim Hill will be in the park for another 20 to 25 years, which is amazing to me. They if that gets closed, I'm gonna look for him. But I think I like this. To me, I am a little scared by the bottleneck effect of having two giant headliners right next to each other, the Splash Mountain Big Thunder effect. But as far as the ride, I have not been to Shanghai. I don't have that kind of money. I'm excited to get a chance to ride it. Even though it's a clone, when you're cloning things from a park that I will probably never get to, like if they decide to bring in Mystic Manor, I'd be like, great. So to me, I think it does fit with Tomorrowland. So I'm excited by this, and also because they're not taking anything out. Am I too excited, or are you on board here?
I think it's a good idea. I wonder how this came about, though. Like, we've got this great IP that no one cares about, that we're never going to expand on. We're never going to make another movie. Nobody remembers the first movie that works at Disney. And we made this movie in 2010 that we put a lot behind that kind of failed at the box office that we'll never put a sequel to. But hey, let's make an attraction based on it. I wonder, what goes into decisions like that? Like, are they running out of, what can we base attractions on? Or is somebody just a really big Tron fan? You know what I mean? And that every year, it's like, this is what I'm proposing. This is what I've come up with. And everyone's like, no. And then finally they're like, yes, that looks great. I'm excited. I mean, it's going to be cool. It's going to be really cool. I really like the idea of adding another attraction to Tomorrowland. When I was a kid, Tomorrowland was my favorite.
Me too.
Land. I love the excitement, the music, the lights, all that. This is going to add to it. It's going to feel like Tomorrowland 1967, maybe. I don't know, with all the new stuff. But I'm excited. I hope this is going to be a great addition, and let's hope that it runs really efficiently. It seems like every time there's a new Tomorrowland attraction, it doesn't do very well in terms of efficiency. Breaks down a lot. Can't run when it's raining. Doesn't have the ride capacity that they need to eat up the people that are in the line. I just hope it does really well in that, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, well, you've even seen with not even just Tomorrowland. I mean, with Frozen Ever After, and from what I've heard, they've even with the new Pandora attractions, the Banshee ride, they don't have great capacity. And I have not looked up what the capacity is of Shanghai, though I know they could adjust it based on what they need. Yeah, you make up a good point. You bring up a good point. Well, it's interesting because Tron apparently in Shanghai is a very popular attraction. They don't have, they have the amazing pirates. They have that. But they have a few big headliners. They don't have 35 rides there. But even Test Track, some of the images you see look a lot like Tron. And
right.
So it does make you wonder. It's almost like I think Disney looks at Tron as almost a better property for a theme park than for movies. Because it's like you think I've heard so many people say, "Oh my God, I would love to ride a light cycle. It looks so amazing." How many of those people are really big fans of Tron or Tron Legacy? I don't know.
I know.
Some, I'm sure, because I think there's definitely a crossover between Disney, Tomorrowland, Epcot fans, and Tron. It's going to be interesting. Your point about Tomorrowland is good because Disneyland's even is in worse shape.
Oh, yeah.
Because no people mover. And also, from the concept art, it looks like the railroad is going to maybe go under or through or something, the structure where Tron will be. And also the speedway is going to be moved somewhat where it might be. So there could be a lot of interlocking rides, which that has to be good.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of feels like Adventureland in Disneyland where you have the train, the railroad, you have the Jungle Cruise and Indiana Jones all right in the same space. You can hear one, see one while you're on the other.
It's a good comparison, too, because Tron apparently is going to be really the actual ride is going to be located outside what's considered the berm or the property, which is how Indiana Jones is, where you're way out there from where
totally.
You walk for about 10 years. So I imagine this will probably have a similar or even Space Mountain-like queue where you're going to be in there for a while. It's going to be super popular, but the good thing about the Magic Kingdom is that you add another e-ticket, that's going to alleviate a lot of the pressure on some of the things like Seven Dwarfs Mine Train that don't have good capacity or Space Mountain right next to it, though that may be too close. But still, there's some good things. But let's get to the other big one, which is...
Hey, hold on one thing. Do you know what has really great ride capacity? The Universe of Energy.
Oh, yes. But it only has great capacity if people ride it. But all those old Epcot attractions, I don't even know, but some of those had over 3,000 people an hour.
Totally.
And stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's why Horizons and World of Motion, all those. So then they'd say there's no line. I'm like, yeah, but they have 4 times the capacity of stuff,
That's because there's 1,000 people in that building right now, right?
Right, or more. So that's really funny. Yeah. So
sorry, I didn't mean to derail the show there.
No. Sam Genoway has actually written some blog articles about how he thinks Disney is purposefully doing rides with low capacity in order to create artificial demand. Basically, so then people have to use fast passes and want to stay in the hotels and everything. Disney doesn't want high capacity attractions. I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting theory.
Yeah, maybe artificial demand, but it's real rage.
Yes. People don't like it. People are very mad when they stand at when they don't get their fast pass and they're stuck there or whatever. But all right. So speaking of capacity though, this does relate. The other announcement, again, out of the blue, and this is a flat, you're in Kansas City. Not that this theater still exists. They're adding a new theater, which apparently is on par with the Hyperion Theater in DCA, based on Kansas City's Willis Wood Theater, which was, I looked it up a bit. It appears to be that it was destroyed in a fire in 1917, but it did show silent movies for a few years. But Walt did live in Kansas City from 1911. It's not like Steamboat Willie premiered here or something.
No.
But I think it's kind of like what they did with Carthay Circle, where they're trying to do something that goes back to history, and I'm okay with that. What do you think about this? One being it's, a Kansas City theater, and two, it's going to be in a part of Main Street that's not even open right now.
Right. Okay, let's first talk about the Willis Wood Theater. Yeah, it's going to be a basketball theater. The Willis Wood Theater. Earlier in the show, we talked about how I do not like when there is this invented backstory about justification of things. Let's make one thing straight. Walt Disney never saw this theater, okay? Because this theater is located on the north side of downtown, all right? And Walt Disney lived in the southwestern edge of Kansas City, and I very, very much doubt that he ever saw this theater while he lived there. For one, it burned down in 1917, right? And at that point, Walt's 16 years old. He's going to school. He's delivering papers every morning. And it's not when he's doing the laughogram. It's not like he is trying to sell his advertisements or cartoons or whatever to this theater. It's long gone by then. So I cannot wait to read the first contrived Disney went here and some sort of connection to Disney. The only thing that's connected between this theater and Disney is the fact that it's in Kansas City. Let me give you another hint here, or another little nugget of information. Walt Disney hated Kansas City. Literally, he never came back, ever. Never came back. He went to Marceline and purposely did not fly into Kansas City. That was, it's ridiculous. He left here in 1923. just I don't want to say a broken man, but like literally like with everything he owned under his arm and was like, I am never coming back to this place. This place can have it, right? Throughout his life, he had friends in Marceline, the Mallons family, all of them. They were all, there. Walt never came back to Kansas City. There is no like Kansas City, Walt Disney, later in life connection. This theater, I had to look up what it was because I had no clue what this theater was. Probably because it was only around for like 13 years in the first 2 decades of this century. If they wanted to do something, why not do the Colony Theater? The Colony Theater's not that big. There's also a theater in Kansas City where Walt Disney's stuff actually played called the Isis Theater. There's a lot more places they could have done than the Willis Wood Theater. I get it. It's from the era that they want to make, connected to Victorian Main Street, USA in Walt Disney World. But it makes no sense to me. Like, it makes no sense.
That's interesting because when I originally heard the announcement, I assumed this was something that Walt went to or that his film showed at. Or that it was a big deal because that's what your assumption is. You're like, oh, great. They did Carthay Circle. They're doing this. I mean, they're connecting to his life. This is great. He lived in Kansas City, but you're right. It's weird.
It's contrived. It's totally contrived.
Yeah. That end is silly and is true. And they're probably going to pull in, Frozen the musical or something and show it there. I don't know what by the time it'll open will be the big show they want to do. The one thing I do like beyond all of that is that you're going to have thousands of people probably every 4 or 5 times a day going in there for air conditioning, not being on the paths, not being in line. Like you see it like at the Animal Kingdom when Finding Nemo the musical comes on a busy day, especially when it's hot, or The Lion King. And those are good shows. It's nothing against those shows, but they need those shows. Hollywood Studios needs Indiana Jones. The Magic Kingdom doesn't have that. The purpose is served kind of by Carousel of Progress, Country Bears, Tiki Room, but those are shorter shows and they're not the same way. I think this is a good thing for the park in terms of how the park works. The backstory is a little weird.
Totally weird. Right.
All right. Well, I know we've been talking a long time, but let's very quickly, we haven't mentioned Disneyland at all. They're going to have an immersive Marvel land and apparently a Captain America attraction. They didn't say anything. And they're going to replace Paradise Pier with Pixar Pier, which is a head scratcher for a lot of people, I think.
Didn't they just fix Paradise Pier?
They did, and that was part of the thing. It was part of, they redid a few of the things. They had the Silly Symphony swings and, the Mickey Fun Wheel and everything. I mean, everything's not exactly the same. They closed a few things, and apparently it was a very strange announcement, the whole thing. Like, they're going to have whimsical neighborhoods with Toy Story Incredibles Inside Out. And you mentioned you go to Disneyland, and also Paint the Night is going into DCA, which is interesting. Marvel, Pixar, anything, what kind of stands out to you? Does it excite you that the weird Hollywood land is kind of going to go away completely, probably? Or is that?
Yes.
Because I know you like the old Hollywood, but the Hollywood in DCA is not the same, right?
No. Here's the deal. I never liked DCA's Hollywood Land or Tower of Terror because it was just a cheap knockoff of California's, essentially, right? It had different architecture, which I appreciated. I thought that was cool, but, the ride wasn't the same. It was a little smaller, less thrillish, and then the whole Hollywood Pictures backlot area, and then what became Hollywoodland never really. I liked it at night when they had fun like dance parties and stuff like that. That was fun. Here's the thing: an immersive Marvel land isn't Marvel like just the regular world.
Yeah,
so it's just going to be like New York.
Well, here's a quote. It says. New stories will allow you to team up with your favorite superheroes like never before. Are they, again, going to do something like Star Wars-like? It sounded like they were so vague they don't even maybe know what they're doing.
They don't even know, right.
But it could
It sounds like when they first announced Fantasyland expansion back in 2009 or whatever, and they were like, oh, we're going to have this. We don't really know how it's going to work, but we're going to have this. And then none of it happened.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh...
Right.
People don't really seem to like this that much. How about we do this? Like coaster, yes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's so early. I hate to speculate too much. They're so immersive. So my thought is they'll have some sort of e-ticket, but maybe they're going to have a lot of characters, again, kind of like interacting more with you. That's kind of the big approach, which for me, that's great. but just do some really great attractions. Start there, and then we'll see about the immersive stuff, I think.
Here's what excites me. Cool scenery. That's what I want to see. When I go to a theme park, great scenery.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's going to do it, but we'll see.
We'll see. All right. So I'm jumping all around, but here we go. Here's the other one that, speaking of immersive,
yes,
Disney confirmed the rumor of the Star Wars themed resort.
Yes.
That, I mean, it seems like we're talking a ways out, but 100% immersive. The windows look to space. I read Len Testa put on Twitter that it would likely cost $2,500 for a family of 4 to be there for 2 nights.
Nice.
So let's take, the price is really high. And I don't want to get into the would you pay it, would you not, but can they pull this off with what they want to do to be this immersive, no breaking characters, nothing? Are they capable? Disney, who can barely open a Frozen boat ride and not have problems. Can they pull this off? I mean, are they just, if they pull off 80% of this, are we in great shape?
Okay, so that price point tells me that they're actually building the actual Death Star. I mean, is that what you're led to believe?
Well, they're only going to have like 200 rooms, so I guess they have to pay all the actors or something. Right. I don't know.
No, I'm going to guess it will never happen.
Well, he did hedge a bit. Chapek said stuff like, we are currently developing. We are currently working on. He did not say, in 2021, this will be built. People, I mean, the headlines that came out were Disney to build Star Wars Resort. It could happen, but wow. I mean, they got to do some serious testing on that. That would be fun to be involved in all the testing, though, I'd say.
Yeah, I find that price point very interesting as well. Will it be in the theme park?
I think it's not, because I actually heard they might be trying to do these not just like in Florida. If it really works, they could open. I mean, they tried this with Disney Quest.
Yeah, Disney Quest Chicago. Right?
Yeah, so I think that makes me hesitate. But I think the idea is it would be likely not in the park. My thought is it's going to be a freestanding thing on Disney property that you go to. You spend almost like they said, like a cruise ship or something. Like you spend 2, 3, 4 days or whatever, and then you go from there. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to track, but I don't mean to be skeptical, but it seems like a stretch.
Yeah, it does. It seems like a huge stretch.
And I will finish with this, which is the most kind of the gondolas we talked about, I think even on the Epcot Rumors one, or I talked about before, but the Skyliner, they look a lot like the Skyway. Yep. You know, would this entice you? Personally, with 4 of us, I don't really want to go stay at Pop Century, but would this entice you to try and stay at the Korean Beach or even at this new DVC resort if there's a great deal? Or would having that out of access be worth it?
Here's the deal. I don't know where I'm going to stay next time I go to Walt Disney World. Honestly, like the prices have changed so much. Like, I don't even know. Or here's what I will say. Skyliner is the most exciting thing out of all these announcements. I am so excited. This reminds me of the original Epcot plan. This reminds me so much of that, of Walt Disney World 1970s. It is so cool. I cannot wait to ride this thing.
Yeah, I would almost want to go there, just like you get to the Hollywood Studios, especially if they haven't opened Star Wars and everything. You stay a little bit like, okay, let's ride to Epcot. Let's just and then let's go back just to ride that thing. Because it's kind of like anything.
Right. Do you remember, like, you know, back in like the 90s? I don't know if you said, I guess you did go there. But just remember riding the monorail around? That was like a highlight of a trip when you were a kid. Let's ride the monorail to Epcot and then ride it back. You know, my brother and I did that without our parents. That was like the highlight of our trip. It was so fantastic.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was awesome. I love that trip. And and the Skyway itself, though granted it was inside the park, but we used to ride that when I was a kid. You would just ride it back and forth. And the Disneyland one, which I went once when it was there, where it went through the Matterhorn. I mean, there was things like that, like just the idea of other transportation and just forward movement and all that. It's a no-brainer, and I hope this is a success, because my suspicion is if it's like a home run and they're just getting so much booking and people love it, that they could it's probably a lot cheaper to expand than the monorail.
Yeah. Oh, totally cheaper. And it just looks awesome. I'm so excited. I can't wait to do it.
All right. Well, great. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering all the different things. Is there anything else from D23 that I haven't hit on that you want to talk through?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, great. I figured we've been talking for like an hour, and I hadn't planned for this long, but there's a lot. That's the thing. I don't feel like all these are home runs, but I'm impressed by the volume of things they've announced. And apparently, you read rumors that there are still other discussions and other things we discussed on the Epcot Rumor Show that are not dead. So we'll see what happens. So if people want to follow your podcast or get in touch with you, like what's the best place online to do that?
Twitter. Yeah. WEDWay Radio on Twitter. And then WEDWay Radio on Facebook, though I don't use Facebook very often. So, yeah, we'll see. My brother, you can find him at 3028, which is spelled awkwardly. You'll find it if you just keep plugging in different ways on how to spell it or with numbers and words. That's his account on there. But, yeah, WEDWay Radio, WEDWayRadio.com. We should have another episode coming out here in the next week or so of WEDWay Radio, the big show. And we're going to look to be finishing up the season in the next month or so. And it's exciting stuff. Thanks for letting me plug it on here. Oh, thanks for having me on.
No problem. It was a blast to have you on. I feel like we need to come back in a year or something or two.
Yes.
And after they've talked more and say, well, we talked about this. They're not doing that. They're not doing that. They're not doing that. They're doing this. Just do an update or something. I think
we'll just make a checklist. Yes.
Yeah. So, but no, it was great having you on. I love the podcast. If you are a listener here and you have not listened to WEDWay Radio, I would recommend it. They've been around for a while and they're doing great stuff.
Thanks so much for having me on again.
That was really fun. I love thinking ahead to what's going to happen at the parks, and it's going to be a fascinating time in the next 4 years or so to see what happens leading into the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. If you'd like to learn more about this site, this podcast, and also read my blog post, you can go to tomorrowsociety.com. You can also reach out to me by email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com, Twitter @TomorrowSOC, or Facebook or Instagram @TomorrowSociety. The music for this podcast is by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. You can go to adamhookey.com to learn more about his music. He has a CD out that is amazing. Whew. This was a long show. I had a blast doing it. If you'd like to look back to some of my earlier shows with experts like Len Testa and Sam Genoway and Chad Emerson, you can find them on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts, and ratings and reviews are always wonderful and help me spread the word about the show. Thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you all again very soon.